So as we think about our legal obligations, that's such an important basis for assuring that students have access to education here at Smith. And it has represented a sea change in our country in terms of the opportunities disabled students have had to pursue higher education, particularly at the graduate level. At the same time, there are these parameters for legally assuring people's rights were never really intended to be reductive, and sometimes they can be in the ways that we look for, well, what am I obligated to do? What do I have to do? And that's not really the spirit that the ADA was ever intended to be received in. And so we are talking about good educational practices here, and accommodations in many ways are consonant with that. But we can also think more broadly, and that's where this concept of universal design has come into play. Universal design was a concept developed around architectural access that spoke to the design of buildings in ways that had seamless accessibility, almost invisible in the creation of facilities. That concept's been borrowed and applied to the classroom setting so that we can think about how to kind of seamlessly make modifications in our environment, in our teaching strategies, and help all of the learners in our classroom in ways that don't require specific accommodations. So the Smith College School for Social Work has actually made an explicit commitment to the process of universal access. And part of the reason for this video is to support you in thinking about the ways that you can be part of that exciting new way of thinking about inclusivity and reaching all of our different types of learners. In fact, universal access can be a lens on, and must be a lens in many ways, on race and class preparation and culture, because it begins to help us think about the many different ways of knowing and learning. Some of the really important and interesting ways that universal design can be helpful is that it normalizes the need for learning supports. It allows us to handle a lot of things in a very integrated way without singling out students, without requiring them to provide expensive documentation for really very simple kinds of modifications in the classroom. It allows us to shift the burden in many ways from the individual, the student, as if all the problem resides in them. The accommodation model can, while it's critically important, it can also have that sense to it that it's the student who's got the problem and they're the one being accommodated, when in fact, in many cases, it's about the way we've been teaching. And it's not that we're teaching wrong, that it's been wrong, but there may be ways that we can teach that would be broader and would allow us to reach different kinds of learners. So the universal access commitment allows us to identify barriers in the environment and gives faculty a chance to review their strategies and consider facilitating learning in the classroom in some different ways. It can reduce the need for these kinds of reactive accommodations because, in fact, we're being proactive in planning because we anticipate that there are going to be all kinds of learners, as opposed to being surprised or caught off guard when we have a student with disabilities who needs something that we hadn't thought about or that we weren't prepared for. So it's a shift in mindset that we start to think differently as instructors. And as an instructor myself, I'm challenged to think about all those ways that teaching feels comfortable to me, to easily default to those ways that we teach that are comfortable, that are the ways we learned. And those ways worked for us, but they don't necessarily work for everyone. And that pushes all of us in some ways to be broader and more inclusive in our teaching. Universal design, proactive approaches to teaching can reduce the need for students to have to provide expensive documentation. Not every student has access to those kinds of resources, and if there are simple things we can do to make the environment more accessible, there's no need for those things to go through an accommodation process. These are ways that we can push back on what really are kinds of structural forms of ableism. And that's a concept that we haven't all had a lot of time to think about, but it really speaks to the ways that there are sort of invisible ways embedded in the way we teach and the way we construct educational environments that really are not friendly to people who don't learn in a particular way. And it's never our goal to privilege one type of learner over another. We're here to reach everybody. We want everybody to graduate from SSW and be successful, wonderful social workers and go on to teach and support others in the world. So this whole process, again, really fits with our values.